A decade on, 2014 remains a year for the ages in WWE history. Looking back, it's crazy to see how many great and significant moments we still talk about today all happened in 2014. You could very easily argue that 2014 was, if not the best, the most significant year of the 2010s for WWE. Mind you, I'm not saying everything that happened in WWE in 2014 was the best or made the most sense, as you would expect. But you can't deny we saw and experienced some unforgettable moments all in this one year. So let's take a look at and relive some of these key moments that took place in WWE during 2014. First up, Batista returns to WWE. Let's kick off the video how WWE kicked off 2014 with the first key happening, which was Batista returning after 4 years. If like me, you grew up watching him, you would have been ecstatic when in late 2013, WWE started playing these teaser videos and then announced that Batista was coming back on the January 20th episode of Monday Night Raw. But right off the bat, this didn't go as well as we would have hoped due to a number of reasons. Batista was supposed to come back as one of the top baby faces in the company, but in his grand return he was introduced and welcomed by Triple H, Stephanie McMahon and Randy Orton, the Authority, who were mega heels at the time. So the first impression we got was him hugging and shaking hands with public enemy number 1. Still, not too much damage was done just yet. Understandably, Batista and Triple H have a long history, so you can understand this in kayfabe. But then Batista cut his return promo in which, with a heelish demeanour, he said he's back to win the Rumble the following week, to win the world title from Randy Orton, and to headline WrestleMania, and this is where the seeds were planted of his return not going as planned. You see, at this time there was this fella called Bryan, more on him later, who was by far the most popular babyface in the company. Fans didn't want anyone but Bryan to win the Rumble, and WWE found out the hard way during the Rumble match itself. So this then leads us to the second topic, the Royal Rumble in 2014. The Royal Rumble match in 2014, which along with the following year's Rumble match in 2015, are both remembered as complete and epic disasters. As mentioned, it can't be stressed enough how over Bryan was during this period. The pay-per-view kicked off with a great match between him and Bray Wyatt to blow off their rivalry that saw Bryan actually join the Wyatt family the month before. Bryan lost the match and all us fans thought, okay, not to worry, he lost in the opening match but will come out and win the Rumble in the main event, right? Surely WWE knows this is what we want. Well, to quote The Rock, it doesn't matter what you want, said WWE in return. But before the Rumble match, also on the show, we saw John Cena vs Randy Orton for the WWE World title. Both are absolute legends, but the crowd could not care less. This seemed like the 100th time we'd seen this match on pay-per-view. Fans hijacked the match, chanting for Bryan, chanting this is awful, and booed everything both did and told them they sucked. Randy eventually won, but did I mention no one cared? And then it was time for the main event, and oh boy. CM Punk was out at number 1, more on him later, and was joined by Seth Rollins at number 2. The ring continued to fill up with a bunch of mid to lower carders with nothing much of any note happening until at number 15, we saw our future tribal chief. Roman Reigns dominated everyone and cleaned house, and the fans actually cheered him. But then things took a turn. Out at number 28 came the returning Dave Batista, and then at number 29 came Big E, and then the anticipation built. The yes chants began, 1 spot left, and Bryan hasn't come out yet. Surely he's the last entrant, which also means he's got a great chance of winning, right? Yes, we're so excited, and then 3, 2, 1.
He is a winner of the 2006.
The buzzer hits, and then booyaka, out comes Paul Ray to a chorus of boos as the crowd loses their mind, and not in the good way.
Whoa! Yeah, Mysterio sends Rollins flying.
Looking back, you have to feel so bad for Paul Ray. I don't think he's ever been booed like this before, and this was all on the company for putting him in such a bad spot. I think Stone Cold even said in his podcast at the time that he would have taken that spot just to save Paul Ray from getting booed. This was so short-sighted of WWE to not even put a heel in this spot to get this reaction that was so obviously going to come. The crowd then completely turned on the whole match, and there was no stopping them now. They weren't helped when down to the final 4 we saw the BS elimination of CM Punk when Kane, who wasn't even in the match at the time, eliminated him. The final 2 were Batista and Roman, and when the fans deduced that Batista was winning, guess what? They cheered Roman and wanted him to win instead. But that wasn't to happen yet. Batista instantly became a mega heel 1 week after returning as the babyface we all missed. This event was certainly something alright, and is still a talking point today. But moving on, next up, CM Punk quits the WWE and that infamous podcast. Other than the shocking booking, the Royal Rumble 2014 event is also famous for another reason. It turned out to be the last time we saw CM Punk in a WWE ring for 10 years until his return in 2023. I think most of us know the story behind this by now. CM Punk was hurt and frustrated with creative. He walked out of WWE the following day on Raw after the Rumble. The plan for him was to face Triple H at WrestleMania 30, for which Punk said the famous line, "I don't need to work with you, you need to work with me," to Triple H. Punk wasn't a fan of part-timers coming in, not pleased with never main eventing WrestleMania, which he really should have the year prior when The Rock took that spot, and believed the company creative was not delivering what made sense and what the fans wanted. CM Punk then went on the now infamous episode of Colt Cabana's podcast and let rip on WWE and various other people. He cited medical negligence of his staph infection and other injuries, not being happy with the booking, and that he had had enough and was much happier after leaving. Turned out he wasn't too much of a fan of Ryback also. He then mentioned he had received his termination papers on his wedding day, which Vince did claim wasn't intentional. Nevertheless, at this point it looked very likely we'd never see CM Punk in WWE ever again. But as we've learnt with WWE, never say never. Moving on to the fourth topic of this video, that Occupy Raw segment. Before we get to WrestleMania 30, during the build to it we got one of the more memorable Raw segments when Daniel Bryan and the Yes Movement occupied Raw. Have I mentioned that Daniel Bryan was kind of popular during this period yet? A few weeks before WrestleMania, Daniel Bryan was in the ring cutting a promo on Triple H challenging him to a fight, and he wasn't leaving the ring until he got there. And this time he wasn't lying. He then invited members of the Yes Movement to join him, and we got this incredible scene where the ring and the surrounding areas were full of people in Daniel Bryan t-shirts saying they weren't leaving until they got what they wanted. And it turns out he didn't just want to face Triple H at Mania, he wanted to be in the world title match in the main event if he beat him. After a bunch of back and forth with the Authority, Triple H eventually agreed, and looking back this remains one of the classic Raw segments in recent memory. Moving on to the next moment, the streak comes to an end. WrestleMania 30 was historic for two predominant reasons. One of those reasons was, in my opinion, the most memorable moment I'll talk about in this whole video, and that was The Undertaker's streak coming to an end at the hands of Brock Lesnar. I'm sure many of you might have felt the same at the time. When Lesnar hit that third F5, you would have thought, wow, I guess Taker's kicking out of 3 of these things as there's no way he's losing, right? But then as soon as the ref counted 3, it was one of those moments where time stood still, and 10 years later you still remember where you were, who you were with, and what your reaction was when this happened. Unlike after every other match, as soon as Lesnar won, his theme song didn't play for a while, and that I give WWE credit for, as the hush that fell over the stadium of 60,000 people, all in disbelief, was deafening. I think I can still hear Paul Heyman screaming, "Oh my god, you did it," in my head. The life had been completely sucked out of the stadium.
He did it! He did it!
Undertaker actually suffered a serious concussion only 6 minutes into this match. After the match, there were reports that he collapsed backstage and was in a really bad way, and that Vince missed the rest of WrestleMania to accompany him to the hospital. Years later, there's no surprise to learn that this was a Vince last-minute decision to do this. Undertaker has since admitted that he would have rather someone like Bray Wyatt or Roman Reigns have ended his streak, as Lesnar didn't really need it and was already a megastar. I think it's near impossible to recreate a moment like this ever again. This guy's reaction said it all at the time. Moving on to the next reason why WrestleMania 30 was historic, and that's Daniel Bryan winning in the main event. With the streak ending, it was almost certain WWE would have to give us a happy ending to WrestleMania, and that's what happened when Daniel Bryan won the world title in the main event. Earlier on in the night, he beat Triple H in a one-on-one match. The main event now was a 3-way with Bryan, Orton and Batista. After a bunch of interference from Triple H and Stephanie, and a tease of Bryan being unable to complete the match and being taken away on a stretcher, Bryan eventually won by tapping out Batista to the Yes Lock. It was a momentous win for everyone, as this was never ever in the plans, but the fans made it happen. A time when someone got over organically and the company had no choice but to give in and deliver what the fans wanted. A real true feel-good moment for all, but as we would come to find out, fairy tale endings don't always happen in real life. The next one is a personal favourite of mine, and that's John Cena getting scared by singing children. After WrestleMania and towards the end of April, we got another memorable Raw moment when John Cena got scared by a bunch of children singing. In all seriousness, Bray Wyatt and John Cena were feuding during this period, and this segment was kinda creepy and scary and nothing like we'd seen before. Bray truly was special. This next one's a big one, as we'll look at the reunion of Evolution and then Batista quitting again. During April, we saw what for someone like me who grew up watching them was a historic reunion, as for the first time in nearly 10 years, we had the Evolution theme song in WWE as Batista, Randy Orton and Triple H teamed up to feud with The Shield. Evolution attacked The Shield after their 11-on-3 handicap match on Raw. Admittedly, when this happened, the crowd on the night was not the best with their lack of reaction, but this would start a rivalry, giving us a dream match we never thought we'd see. The faction was officially back the following week when we saw them all sharply dressed in suits. However, it still felt like there was something missing. The hype wasn't all there for some reason. It maybe wasn't helped when the following week after that, we saw Ric Flair, of course a former member of Evolution, go babyface and back The Shield instead, leaving everyone just a bit confused. Nothing ever came of this, as we never saw Rick in this feud again. Nevertheless, in the ring this feud did deliver, as we got 2 great 6-man tag matches between both factions. The first one coming at the 2014 Extreme Rules and the next a month later at Payback. Obviously Seth, Dean and Roman were the ones on the come up, and the feud was designed to get them over, which Evolution did by losing both matches. I personally felt Evolution should have won one match and then lost a third, as there was room for a third, but that wasn't to be. That second match at Payback, despite being great, is more remembered for Batista's blue attire and the blue Tista chants. I mean, it was quite the look and probably not the best in hindsight. Everyone in the match wore black, and then there was Dave covered in baby blue. You couldn't help but focus on it. The blue arm sleeves didn't help at all. The internet lost their minds, it was memes galore and it took on a life of its own. Batista wasn't too pleased after the fact, putting out this tweet. Needless to say, he never wore this gear again. The feud didn't last long, in fact it was over in about a month and left so much potential untapped in my opinion. In early June after that second match, the plan and storyline was for Batista to quit, go and promote the Guardians of the Galaxy movie and then come back, but this didn't happen as Batista quit for real and did not come back. Batista cited creative differences, thus ending his return, which only lasted around 6 months. Unfortunately, this return didn't go as good as it could have been. Who remembers that one match he had with Alberto Del Rio where the crowd completely turned on him? Years later, he even admitted that this run was horrible and wished it went better. Thankfully, this wouldn't be the last time we saw Batista in the ring. Turns out the Shield wouldn't last much longer, as next up is the Shield breaks up thanks to Triple H's Plan B. The same night Batista quit, Triple H unveiled his Plan B, which led to the chair shot to the back we'll never forget, as after 2 great years Seth Rollins turned on his brothers and broke up the Shield. Cracks in the Shield had been appearing from early in 2014. During March, the Shield lost to the Wyatt family, in which WWE teased a breakup after Seth walked out on his partners. After that, they even had a Clear the Air segment on SmackDown where they ultimately reconciled. However, fast forwarding to this fateful night on Raw after Batista had quit, Triple H reiterated his plans to break up the Shield and told us there's always a Plan B. And the unthinkable happened. Seth Rollins, already holding a chair, whacked Roman in the back and then hit Dean, and the heel sellout Seth Rollins was born. All members years later said they weren't really in favour of breaking up the Shield at that point, but you can't argue with the way all 3 of their careers went after this. Seth would go on to be a main event heel, aligning himself with the Authority and becoming champion. Dean Ambrose even became WWE champion eventually before leaving the company. And as for Roman Reigns, we all know what was to come for him. It was one of those more memorable turns in recent times for sure. This year's WrestleMania even played into this angle from 10 years before, when Roman returned the favour to Seth, who was wearing Shield attire, and he sold the chair shot just like Roman did back in 2014. Again, thankfully this wasn't the last time we were to see the Shield as a group. The next key moment of the year came when Daniel Bryan relinquished the WWE title. In May 2014, reality smacked us all in the face when only a few weeks after winning the title and giving us this incredible moment, Daniel Bryan underwent major neck surgery. It was reported that at some point leading up to this, Bryan had lost all feeling in his right arm, and so in storyline, WWE had Kane, who had just lost to Bryan at Extreme Rules, attack Bryan to write him off TV. However, this was going to be more serious than just that and would need Bryan to relinquish the title barely 6 weeks after winning it. So the storyline plan was Bryan refused to give up the title, but the evil Stephanie McMahon stated that if he didn't give up the title, they would fire Brie Bella, Bryan's real-life wife. However, this led to Brie quitting WWE in storyline so that Bryan did not have to give up his title, but after it was revealed that Bryan was going to be on the shelf for maybe a lot longer than expected, the Authority stripped him of his title anyways, ending his reign at just 64 days. This whole situation was the catalyst for the Brie Bella-Stephanie McMahon feud, which would culminate at SummerSlam, where they had a one-on-one match which Stephanie won after Nikki Bella turned on her own sister and cost her the match. Yeah, the less said about this one the better. As for Bryan, he would return in November of 2014 but wouldn't actually compete in the ring until January of the following year. 2015 didn't prove to be too kind for Daniel Bryan either, but fast forward to today, it's great to see him still competing in AEW and being able to plan to go out on his own terms. This next moment's a fascinating one, as we saw John Cena get squashed at SummerSlam. By SummerSlam 2014, John Cena was now the new champion, and in his second defense he went one-on-one with the Beast Brock Lesnar in what turned out to be an incredible spectacle. This match was effectively a one-sided squash match for the vast majority. I mean, Lesnar whooped Cena all over the place like he owed him money. About 10 German suplexes and 2 F5s later, Lesnar won and became the new champ. Cena did have his flurries, but this would be one of the rare times we saw Cena get absolutely dominated and treated like some local hometown jabroni. In an interview years later, Cena admitted that this was in fact his idea, as it was something new and would get people talking. Next up is the main event of Survivor Series 2014. After SummerSlam, the next major moment of the year came at Survivor Series, and it was a big one. After much speculation, we finally saw, after decades of it never happening, Sting entering a WWE ring. Feel like smacking my forearm to get rid of those goosebumps just like The Rock does even thinking about this. The main event of this show was one of the best traditional Survivor Series 5-on-5 elimination tag matches I've ever seen, and the ending had everyone off their seats. The match was Team Cena, which along with Cena featured Dolph Ziggler, Eric Rowan, The Big Show and Ryback, against the heel Team Authority, which included Seth Rollins, Kane, the late Luke Harper, Mark Henry and Rusev. The background to this match was all year long up to this point we had seen the Evil Authority all over most shows running roughshod screwing the babyfaces. After John Cena rejected an offer to join them, Triple H scheduled a Survivor Series tag team elimination match with a team representing the Authority facing a team captained by Cena. The next week on Raw, Vince McMahon then announced if Team Authority lost at Survivor Series, the Authority would be no more and out of power. Triple H would be fired as COO, Kane would be fired as Director of Operations, and Stephanie McMahon would no longer be principal owner of WWE, and trust me, at this point, everyone wanted them to be gone. They had become insufferable. However, on the other hand, Triple H then announced a few weeks later that if Team Cena lost, everyone on Team Cena, except Cena himself, would be fired. The stakes were set and it was time for the match. In the match, we saw a couple of the supporting members get eliminated from both teams, and then we saw the big one when Cena, who you might have expected would be the winner for his team, get eliminated by Seth Rollins after a knockout punch from his own teammate, The Big Show, who switched heel for precisely the 87th time in his career and got himself eliminated. All our hopes now rested on Dolph Ziggler, who was in a 1v3 situation, but Ziggler managed to eliminate Kane and then Harper, and it was down to him and Rollins. Ziggler had Rollins beat and was about to win when Triple H interfered, pulling the ref out the ring and attacking another one. Triple H then beat up Ziggler and called out a stooge referee and had the match all but won, when then we had the Crow, the lights went dim, a scorpion appeared on the Titantron, and out came the icon Sting. For the first time in his 30-year career at that point, he was in a WWE ring. Sting then attacked Triple H, put a downed Ziggler on top of a downed Seth Rollins, leading to Team Cena winning and getting rid of the Authority once and for all. Or at least that's what we had hoped, as surprise surprise, the Authority was back running things pretty much as they were before by early 2015, so this match really meant nothing in that respect. Yup. Nevertheless, seeing Sting face to face with Triple H in WWE was surreal, and the whole finish to the pay-per-view was an iconic, unforgettable moment. It was also big for Ziggler being put in that spot. As for Sting, his WWE run really could have gone better. Unfortunately, injuries didn't help, but again, we can't take away anything from this moment. Moving on after Survivor Series, the next big moment of the year came in NXT this time as we were introduced to Kevin Owens. During this point in time, NXT was really starting to pick up and become at one point arguably a better show than the main roster shows. But during the December NXT pay-per-view, we saw an incredible match in which Sami Zayn beat Neville for the NXT Championship. Leading up to this pay-per-view, WWE had announced that we would see the debut of Kevin Steen, now Kevin Owens. Owens opened up the pay-per-view, beating the now Juice Robinson in quick fashion. However, he wasn't done for the night. After the main event, he came out to celebrate with lifelong friend Sami Zayn, who had just won the title. These two go way back and came up in wrestling together, and these fans knew it, and so this was a nice wholesome way to end the show. But Owens had other plans. He suddenly threw Sami to the floor and hit this vicious looking powerbomb to the edge of the ring. In his first ever show in WWE, Owens had won a match, actually broke his nose in said match, I believe, betrayed his best friend and turned heel. He was then off to the races to have this amazing career he's had so far and is still going strong 10 years later. Another moment during 2014 that perhaps wasn't the greatest to begin with, but was significant, was the arrival of The New Day. If you've listened to any podcast or interview by any of the members speaking about their journey as The New Day, it's a fascinating story. The struggles they overcame at the start to becoming at one point the most over and entertaining act in the whole of WWE and 12-time tag champs is truly inspiring. In the summer of 2014, Big E and Kofi Kingston were a tag team on a losing streak heading absolutely nowhere. Then after another loss, Xavier Woods, who had debuted in WWE the year before and himself going nowhere, confronted the two and cut this promo saying they needed to change to get anywhere. Then they had one night as a trio and then went missing as WWE creative wasn't sure this would work. It wasn't until November 2014 where we would see them as The New Day, with the gimmick being the three of them being black gospel heroes preaching to us. Yep, do you guys remember those early promos and vignettes? Wow, they were tough to watch. You could tell this wasn't going to last long and the crowd let them know. Despite clearly being babyfaces, the crowd would boo them everywhere with the infamous New Day rocks chants instead being very loud New Day sucks chants. This eventually led to them turning heel in 2015, and this was exactly what they needed at the time. From there they took off and was so good at entertaining, they had no choice but to turn back babyface. I would need a whole other video to go through their full journey. It's also surprising to see that 10 years later they're still a team and no one's turned on anyone yet. Although unfortunately with his neck injury it looks like Big E won't be coming back to the ring anytime soon, if ever. And now for the final topic of the video, Vince McMahon appears on the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast. During December 2014, Vince was a guest on Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast, and this got fans super eager to tune in. Vince at that point had very rarely, if ever, sat down for an interview with anyone, and so this was instantly a must-watch. Austin, to his credit, wasn't intimidated like many interviewers would have been and went for it, asking all the things many wouldn't dare ask. Vince talked about how he believes the current roster at the time wasn't as ambitious as ones in the past. He cited them being millennials as a big reason for that. He did, however, praise Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns and Bray Wyatt, saying that he sees potential in all of them, and he wasn't wrong there. However, he did say for Cesaro he wasn't too convinced and said he lacked charisma and didn't have the it factor, which again you can argue he was right about. Austin mentioned how he felt all the wrestlers were walking on eggshells here, and Vince implied that the current roster just isn't hungry enough for the brass ring, apart from a few. As for Brock Lesnar ending The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, Vince straight up said it was all his decision, and when challenged on why Lesnar and not someone else maybe younger, he again stated who else is there, again implying his lack of faith in the whole roster at the time. He then went over his relationship with good old JR and then spoke about CM Punk. This was big, as since CM Punk quit early in the year, WWE had pretty much blacklisted him. They never spoke about him on TV apart from one or two teases and completely ignored him as if he never existed. Vince surprisingly wasn't mad at CM Punk and even said he understood his frustrations with WWE creative. He also apologized for Punk getting his release papers on his wedding day and didn't rule out him coming back. Who would have thought that 10 years later Punk would come back, and this time it would be Vince who is blacklisted and ignored like he never existed from his own company. This interview was definitely a must-watch at the time and had people talking for years after. Before we end, I do want to mention a few shout-outs to other notable events of 2014. The opening segment of WrestleMania 30 with Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold and The Rock was great, and not just because Hulk Hogan kept saying the wrong stadium name and got corrected by the crowd. In 2014, the WWE Network launched, and does anyone remember how much it cost? Yep, $9.99, and I still twitch a little even to this day saying that. Honestly, do you guys recall how they kept shoving that price down our throats about 25 times every show during that period? The night after Mania, we saw the debut of Paige where she beat AJ Lee for the Divas title on her first night on Raw. Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose had this amazing feud during all the summer months of 2014. We also had Damien Mizdow, remember him? I don't care what anyone says, he was great, and the stunt double gimmick got over big and was gold. Just a shame it didn't lead to anything for him. We also had the first and only WLC match between Hornswoggle and El Torito, which turned out to be so much better than it had any right to be. We also saw a fantastic Wyatt Family vs Shield match towards the start of the year. Would recommend going back to watch that if you haven't already. And finally, we had this incredible and sad moment, depending on how you felt about him, where the Ultimate Warrior got inducted into the Hall of Fame the day before WrestleMania, appeared on WrestleMania, and then cut this promo on the Raw after WrestleMania, where I just remember him saying the Ultimate Warrior will live forever, and then the very next day he died from a heart attack. Just shocking how this turned out. But that concludes the video. I'd be super interested to hear what moment from WWE in 2014 you remember the most, so let me know below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.